You're listening to the Valley Current.
We do. We work as hard as we can.
You've been at this for a while, right?
This will be our 10th year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Incredible.
That's a super honor. That's actually a super honor to it took 14 years for Microsoft to go public. And people don't realize that. They want to believe everything is just the snap. Of course, VCs expect you to go public like in 5 years.
Yeah.
Used to be the case years ago, that it was normal to expect a 10 to 15 year hike.
Especially for biotech. I think that's something that gets lost with AI and software. It's easier to do more rapid turnaround times. But when you're dealing with life sciences,
this is like a classic situation where I have to actually go out and buy a new PC. Like I do something that's so frugal. I buy equipment that's kind of a year old because you get it for like half the price. And then, of course, the stuff doesn't work as well, and my wife, she's like, just get a brand new computer. And of course, they announced today, which I was spending some time looking at, they announced that NVIDIA entered a partnership with Microsoft where they're going to put essentially a supercomputer on a laptop for $2,500. So everything that you can do in the cloud with Claude and OpenAI and all the tools is going to be local to your laptop. So no more cloud, no more, hey, what's the risk that all this stuff is going to get out there? It's going to be local. And essentially, you're going to have this ability to have your entire life organized on a machine that is your local agentic AI to do everything that you want to do locally. Get all your answers locally. I mean, I don't know what
my
this
new best friend
means. I don't know what this means, like conceptually. I think it's a huge announcement. Conceptually, people have been talking about this for a while. Conceptually, it comes right before both Anthropic and OpenAI that both have cloud models that are based on whatever it is. We have the high-end version. I think we have a version, where we spend like $2,000 a month per person. It's not like a super ginormous expensive version, but you get a lot more power and you get this teaming ability. You get this enterprise teaming ability where you can actually, leverage people's time, but it's very expensive. And I'm not even sure it's worth it. It might be we should downgrade to like $200 a month. But conceptually, you're getting this super assistant. So imagine you can just buy a $2,500 laptop and even download, I don't know that you'd want to do this, but download the Chinese stuff that's almost as good, right? Because they basically copied all of OpenAI's stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have your own LLM on a local machine with all of your knowledge, starting at first grade or second grade, like literally every paper I've ever done. I mean, who knows where all that stuff is at this point, right? Like if you actually saved it, there are people I know that have been computer users for a long time. They're much younger than me, and they save everything. And they're like building these personas.
It's going to be left to other people in their wills.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting problem because if you did a survey of estate and lawyers, like people that have done estate plans, they're like, I don't know what to do about it. Here's a clause. Just say digital rights go to some power of attorney person. Like they don't really get that, there are some people I know that own like 10,000 domain names, 10,000. And some of them are like 3-letter domain names. Like I knew the guy that owned sex.com. Yes. I didn't represent him, but he came in for some advice. He ended up getting that domain. There's a book written about that. I think there's even a movie. That domain fetched like something like $100 million. And it got stolen. It got stolen. Like part of the story, they stole it from him, and then he had to pursue it. And I think he did get it back, but it cost him a small fortune in legal fees. I could tell you a lot of stories. I've been doing this for 45 years, and I was in the Valley right at the very, very, very start of, because I was a master in computer science on mainframes with punch cards, like way back in the day.
I
Yeah,
love that.
that really dates me. But I did get something from all my um, famous Stanford biology people that says my real age is 60. My real biological age is 60. I don't know if you buy that view, but I can give you the group that takes the blood test and the urine test and does this stuff. They want you to obviously sign up to a subscription.
Oh yeah.
That's probably the future because it's motivating. Let's say it's
Mhm.
all wrong. Let's just pretend it's totally wrong. When your mindset is set that, hey, your diet is great, you're exercising, you go and you improve your diet. You keep exercising. It might as well just be phony. It could be like completely off base. You are changing that person, and they're going to be motivated to stay on the diet, lose the weight. I mean, do
Yeah.
all the things that are
You're
smart.
competing against yourself.
Yes, yeah, and it's kind of a future, and I do think to some degree a lot of the stuff is snake oil, but I do think to some degree when we change people's mindsets about their health, we do motivate them. So that's a little bit of a segue into your business because you deal with stuff that's very highly technical biological material, and you've been doing it for 10 years, which makes you an expert because in truth, success is very much about do you put the hard thinking in that no one else is doing? And if you do it long enough and you're decent at the scientific method, which, goes without saying if you get a PhD from anywhere decent, sooner or later you're going to hit that magic moment where you say, bang, this is the thing that's really going to change the way business is done. Now, you have to have the right business model, you have to have the right backers, you have to have people that have patience. There's a lot of other factors that actually play into success. But tell me your story and tell me how the two of you met and how you decided to form essentially majority female-owned business, right? It's kind of a female business. So you can hit up all the female venture capitalists that are out there that are interested in that, right? You
Yeah,
might be
well,
muted.
well, I mean, we're using the same mic because my mic is not functioning right now, but it really jumps from what you were just saying, the placebo effect. It might be a really powerful thing, but we want to make sure you're actually getting what you think you're getting. And so that's really where the business started. I was working for traditional medicinals tea company, doing best agricultural practices work in India, really looking at how we get herbs out of the field and into a bottle and on a shelf and have the highest quality herb along that process.
Where herb is not the 420 marijuana
No,
type
we're
herb, because
talking
that's what
about
Silicon Valley people think the word herb means.
lavender and parsley and
Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, right?
Yeah.
Basically like the song, right? We could be playing that in the background. That's a future invention. You say that, the song comes on for 6 seconds, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, these guys are doing the real thing. That's actually a big business, by the way. I knew a family that is the brand. They're like billionaires. They have the famous brand of all those little cans of spices. I forget their name. Maybe I can introduce you to those guys because they're
no, right.
they're like a major force. They're now big, kind of big art collectors. But I'm trying to remember the name of the brand. It's some really like super, super high end brand of spices. It'll come to me in a minute.
Is it Morton and
I would
Bassett?
say Morton.
No, no. I want to say it starts with an S, but in the back of my mind, there's some can of pepper or something. There's some name. It'll come to me in a minute. Just like, for example, this could be a good introduction. I know the Lundberg family that basically controls rice cakes in the U.S. Like they own millions of acres of rice fields in California.
I have been
It's a
in all of their rice fields. So
yeah,
I did
it's
my
a fifth.
dissertation in rice, and I
It's a fifth generation family business, 5 generations. They are doing what few American families, farm families really can pull off, which is keep every generation involved and make it so it may be like a really long-lived corporation because there are very few corporations that get to live more than 300, 400 years. Very few. Like there's a few beer companies in Japan. There's a few Chinese companies, but it's rare for an American company to last more than 100 years. Like Ford
And
just
their
made,
quality is really good.
Yeah,
yes,
and they're
right, the
innovating,
quality
which is
side.
really interesting because we're
Right.
innovating in what you might consider to be a very stagnant sector of ag, like traditional crops, but they're doing amazing innovation as well, both in germplasm and how they farm. So yeah, it's a really interesting organization.
Right. The
Yeah.
rice cake completely changed their business. They went from a business that was very much kind of like a commodity business to, hey, this is actually a specialty,
Yeah.
almost like popcorn, right? It's almost like the equivalent of something you take to a movie theater.
Yeah.
Movie theaters
Yeah.
will go away a lot faster than they will.
Yep.
So where'd you guys meet again?
So we met in grad school. So we met at a UGA in the genetics department. Kerin and I sat back to back in cubicles in the lab. And so we have a lot of time together in highly stressful environments. And so we've learned how to work very well together. And that's where we met.
But you're not born in Georgia, right? You just went there for school.
We both did just meet there in school. I was born in the Southeast in Virginia and moved
Uh-huh.
quite a bit in my childhood. I've lived in many states. Moved once 5 times in one school year. So seen a lot of this country in my.
Was it a military family? Is that why?
Ironically, my dad's in the military, but my parents were divorced. My mother was a nurse and she was just moving her way up the corporate ladder. And every time she got a better job, we moved. And so we moved a lot. She was doing
Interesting.
a better
And
job.
for you, where were you born, Kerin?
I was born in White Plains, New York. So
Okay.
Westchester County is where I grew up. And then when I was 12, I moved to North Carolina and was in the South ever since. Went to Vanderbilt for undergrad and then went to UGA for my PhD. And then that's where I met Eleanor and Nick as well.
So you're very, in a way, I mean, you guys are similar but different. I think of White Plains, I think of kind of expensive real estate and people like sort of commuting into the city but not living in the city. And there's actually a great Apple series that's called Friends and Neighbors
No, I
about
haven't seen
people.
it.
Oh, you have to watch that. It is very funny. It's about
Right.
these very high-end, rich kind of hedge fund guys that basically have unlimited amounts of money and then what happens to them when they kind of get into some trouble. It's really, really worth watching. You'll see it might be a town that's a little further north than White Plains. Maybe it's New Bedford or something like that, where are the Clintons?
Chappaqua.
Chappaqua. Like it's some town a bit
Yeah.
north. And they sort of
Cool.
identify it, but I think of it as Westchester County. I'm from New
Mhm.
York. I grew up. I grew up I was born in Queens. I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to Brooklyn College and City University of New York. Total free ride through the master's degree, and it was fun. It was interesting. And then I left to go to law school on the West Coast and stayed for most of the time. Then there's a whole story about Florida that I won't bore you with. It's a really interesting story. I took the bar exam in Florida in my 60s, which no one does. Like no one takes another bar exam because they wouldn't let me lateral in. And I basically wanted to practice while we were going through COVID and didn't want someone saying you're involved in the unauthorized practice of law. Everyone
Yeah.
laughed. Everyone was like, you're crazy. Just ignore them. Just do it. I was trying to do the right thing. Let me tell you, it's a hard exam.
Yeah.
Passed
Oh, yeah.
it. I passed it buying some used books on eBay. And my wife, who has a PhD from Stanford, was like, you're never going to pass this exam. You're doing it the totally wrong way. You got to take the course. You got to sit down in a class. I said, it's COVID. There's no sitting down. You watch stuff on Zoom. You can watch it on YouTube. I mean, I didn't do that. I just bought the books. So it's a good story. It's a funny story. I mean, it's an interesting story. But so when did you get interested in starting a business together? Was it right out of school?
Yeah, so I've been doing consulting and for them and some other organizations, and it became very clear that the biggest pain point in botanical trade was identification. Like, didn't matter who you would talk to, if it was a buyer or it was someone who was trying to put things in a formula on the other end of the spectrum. Everyone's biggest problem was identity, and so at the time, Kerin was just finishing up, and she had such amazing experience in her PhD where she really dug into developing a lot of the next generation sequencing techniques that allow us to get enough data that you can start to answer some of these big data questions, right? When I went to grad school, when I first started, I wanted to study big genome questions, and I had to study rice, which is why I know the Lumbergs, because
Okay.
it was the only species that had more than one genome available. Right. And so we've come a long way since that beginning. And part of the long way is based on these techniques that were developed in the lab that Kerin was also in.
So the computing has gotten more powerful. The statistical techniques have certainly gotten more available. When I was doing computer science, you had to write your own Fortran programs or assembly programs, or occasionally there was a package. I think the beginning of SPSS was right about in that time frame because people were like, wow, all this stuff is now going to be in a pre-existing package. I think now people are like, ignoring all the software and just going right to AI and saying, "Hey, run this stuff for me,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think that's something really unique about what we do because you can create the ability to generate the sequence data, but where we have our moat, if it as it were, is all of the data that was necessary to identify species has to be collected, it has to be verified and curated and tested and then brought into a software system where it can parse everything out. And so this is something where AI can and is helping us make the next versions better and better. But it's not something that you can just query on Chat GPT and say, hey, how do I tell these things apart? These are methods that have literally taken us 9 years to build the infrastructure to do on a wide scale for the top, 100 plus species that we see in natural products.
So you have to actually have a lab that's extracting data, right? There's no data company that you can go to and say, we want to buy some data. Like I could go to
Right.
a company and say, I want to buy a mailing list and give me all the lawyers that are practicing in this field throughout the United States, and bang, they can give me whatever 10,000 names
And,
overnight for a fee.
and it's further complicated by the fact that a lot of the public data is incorrectly labeled.
Yeah.
And so if you're relying on an AI type interface with publicly available data, it's a huge problem because much of that data is incorrectly labeled. And so you're generating a lot of false data.
So you guys build ginormous databases of data so your extraction, I guess there's a compilation copyright there for sure from an intellectual property point of view. Maybe there's the beginning of something in the organization of the data that allows you to say this has a special aspect to it that's patentable. I mean, I don't know what you're doing to build a moat and put some legal fences around it, because whenever you talk to VCs, and I think that's your next mission, probably, you're at that point where you can actually say we have something proven and people are buying it. And so now we need to scale, is they want to know, well, what would stop a bigger company from just doing everything that you're doing, but at scale? Or what would stop the Chinese from doing it at scale, or the Japanese, or I don't know who else is in this field that's doing stuff. I imagine it's a global type of business at this point. I don't know. You tell me, is it global at this point?
Yes, it is. And so I think where I would just start as a baseline is that if you want to test the top 40 herbs that make up the majority of commerce in natural products, you're not actually sourcing 40 things or 40 species, because you have to include all of the relevant sister species, closely related species, and adulterants. So you're really looking at 500 to 600 species off the bat that you have to source globally to get an understanding genetically of who's who. And that is a huge sourcing problem that just requires time on task, connections, a network of mycologists and botanists who can validate those things are what you think they are. And only then can you start putting them into a data system where you know and you're confident that you're getting good data. So if a large corporation would come in, they would still have this massive time on task problem of sourcing these things. A lot of the large manufacturers are using, or a lot of the large product makers are using manufacturers or co-mans to create products, and they're totally dissociated from their source. So it's not like any particular one company that you pull off the shelf have the ability to say, here's all of our reference material for the things that go in our product. They don't have access to that. So you actually have to really go to the source. You have to have that network and build that massive data set, and it takes literally years to do it. And then from there, you have to say, okay, now I have the data. What do I do with it? And I think that's where a lot of software companies start is I've got this data. What do I do with it? But you actually have to start a huge step before that, before you can even get in the door to start thinking about data analysis.
Is there some general trend, like the way it's existed in software, which surprised everyone, frankly, is that people have a GitHub and all of a sudden everything's open source. All of a sudden, most software has been available. So you have these shops that can slap stuff together very quickly because all the body parts are there. So they can create the equivalent of a human being in software by pulling an arm, pulling a leg, pulling a torso, pulling a head, even pulling a brain. And they could say, we can create basically a robot in software overnight. Whereas, God, if you ask someone to do that even just 10 years ago, 20 for sure, it would be, oh, I got to build this, I got to build that, I got to build this. So is there a movement towards making the data more public and accessible, like almost an open source library from a university point of view or from a government point of view? Or is there really a proprietary moat? Because it sounds like you guys have a lot of data and that has a lot of value. And so there's a value equation that's never going to go away so long as you're basically making the data more and more valuable over time using the techniques that you use to make that happen. So what is the answer to that question?
I think there are a lot of public databases out there, and we've looked at them. And the problem is because they're open source, they're so full of trash and it's not even that a sample could be mislabeled, but we find that when you are extracting something, you're not just extracting that species, you're also bringing along the ride all the other critters that live on that species too. And so there's so much noise, and that's why we had to go and curate our own. We would have loved to have been able to use the open source options, but they're so poorly managed. The problem is that you're dealing with the FDA. You're dealing with organizations that need to prove to the government that they have a method that is fit for purpose and that the data that they're using is accurate and true. And you can't just use something public without doing the due diligence. And once you do the due diligence, you're no longer working with that public database. You have to bring it in-house. So you have to have it be built for purpose. And that's what we've done.
And it's also twofold because the issue is the databases are not curated so that you have accurate labels on the information. So that's one level. But the other side of it is the open source bioinformatic pipelines that are available. Like you're talking about, let's take a leg from here and an arm from here and build it. One of the issues with all of those softwares when you're trying to deal with plants is most of those softwares are built for humans. And so the constraints around those softwares don't translate. Human genomes are very simple in comparison to plant genomes. Or those softwares are built for bacteria, which is even more of a problem, right? So you don't have software that is amenable to the complexity of a plant genome. So a plant genome is not only exceptionally large in general, but also has a huge amount of genetic architecture or genetic variation in how and where components of the genome are located. And that is very unique to plants. And if you aren't taking that into consideration, it's an additional layer of garbage in, garbage out. And I think that's an additional layer that gives us a huge moat because most organizations that have really tried to drive this DNA type of identification have had zero organismal understanding and how those things breed, their life cycle, their mating system, how they're distributed, and how the wild population interacts with the cultivated population. Understanding all those biologic components to the plants you're dealing with is critical in building those pipelines to get the correct answer for what the identity of that organism is.
So is there a brand that you're putting on this sort of certification process? Because it almost sounds like your like Underwriters Laboratory is for electrical equipment. They put a UL brand that says, hey, this is not going to burn you or cause your fuses to blow. Like they actually exist as, I think, a nonprofit and it certifies data. And then there's a brand on it. And I think of a FICO score as sort of another brand for financial information. Obviously, there's so many different little marks that people put on things. Do you guys like, I know the name of your company is LeafWorks. Of course, you're doing more than leaves, right? I think. Like it's
Yes.
bigger than that. Like it
Yeah.
could be BioWorks, I guess, or it could be Genome Works, or it could be something broader. Turns out
Yeah.
names are pretty important to VCs. Trust me on this. It's weird. Like our law firm, I think I said this to Nick, is when we started Apple Computer, Jobs and Wozniak walked in dead broke. The reason we didn't take their stock, not my call, but the partner that saw them was, they had a goofy name for the business. They thought Apple was going to work for a computer company. And this guy was a starchy Bostonian that was transplanted into California. It's like, these guys are going to fail so badly. Let's not take their stock. That's just throwing money away. Of course, that would have been like $1 billion outcome for us, maybe even more than that.
Yeah,
So,
he's buying beers for everyone in penance forever.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a funny story because sometimes names carry. Like the name becomes almost more valuable. Like Apple could burn, every factory can burn to the ground, and Apple would survive just having the brand. Like
Yeah.
they don't really have. I mean, let's really call a spade a spade. Apple is great at packaging and marketing. They don't really invent anything. Everything they try to invent fails, like the Newton failed, the Lisa failed. Like I can go through a whole list of failures. The goggles that they did, I forget the name is, but that failed. Now they're trying to do a new set of glasses. My prediction is probably going to fail. They buy inventions. Like they bought, a lot of people don't know this history. A lot of people think, oh, Apple, Jobs invented everything. He invented the iPod, then he invented the iPhone. Bullshit. He didn't invent the iPod. They bought the iPod from my next door neighbor at the time, Tony Fidel. He was the inventor. He didn't really even invent it because there was a pre-existing invention that he just basically said, I'm going to make the software better for how the music gets delivered to it. There was an early little silver device. I forget the name, but I did just remember the name of the spice company, Schilling. Schilling Spices. They got bought by McCormick. So McCormick is the big spice company, and there is kind of a McCormick Schilling line, but the Schilling family, if that's their name, I forget if it is or if it's a different name, but basically they have you could have like 500 boxes of metal spices on your wall. It's like everything that's out there that you can imagine. So that's something maybe to get back to at some point. But my point about the name is it really has to capture the growth of the business, which might be a lot bigger than what you can imagine this becoming. Because to some degree, if you put the right brand and brands together, and you do have the equivalent of a FICO score that you own as the brand, that other people have to come to you to say, well, is our data clean? Is it any good? Is it worth, it's almost like you become the data company. It becomes more valuable than even all the software that you likely are.
Yeah, this is definitely where we're building because the pipeline that we've created started out focused on plants and fungi. And we'll start on plants and then we add in fungi. And now we're able to do microbes. But now, but our platform can do fish ID for fish fraud. It can do really anything where we create a database for it. So we have this species ID test for the tree of life at this point. And the primary verticals that we're focused on is dietary supplements because they're required to test all their ingredients, and food that's massive. But it also extends to cosmetics. It extends to natural OTC for pharma applications. But it can even be extended beyond that for environmental swabbing, for port of trade enforcement. This really is the foundation of the next wave, which is a much higher and larger play. I think for us, where we are in this inflection point, now that we have this species ID test platform, getting that and those funds to start commercialization so we can pick up the fuel that we need to run, because I agree with you entirely that it's really a larger play now. And it's because we've developed this, species type agnostic platform, because we started with plants, which were the hardest, and we built from there. So I agree with you entirely on where your head is at, because that's where it's going.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part in focusing a business that I've found repeats itself often is you got to kind of pick your shots at the start, because you can't boil the ocean.
That's why it's dietary supplements and food.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you have to pick it and then you have to own it.
Yep.
And you have to own it in a way that people recognize you as the thought leader. So it's just going to sound corny, and it's probably going to sound like, oh, it's too much work. But trust me, you could probably find some summer interns or someone that can help you do it. You both with Nick should write like a 12-chapter book. No. It's going to sound
My autobiography has been coming for a while there, Jack.
It shouldn't be the treatise that you would submit. Okay, all my PhD. It should be like, where is the world headed on quality of ingredients, or whatever is the right word that gets to. We all read labels. Like, I'm amazed. I'm just a persistent label reader of everything. I look at labels and I often see stuff that makes no sense to me. It's all gibberish. Like, if you look at most labels and by the way, there are lawyers that call themselves packaging lawyers. Literally, they're in the business of consumer packaging. And it's not a small number of firms. I want to guess there's like
number
50,
of litigation. I think there's
like 50 firms in the U.S. that just deal with
label claims on packaging.
Label claims on packaging. And because it's such a big class action business, right? So they're doing mostly defense work. It's mostly covered by insurance. It's a regular gig for them. They make a fair amount of money defending these cases. They can tell you, they can look at a label. Some of these folks can look at a label, I'm sure, and say, man, that's just totally wrong. This needs to change. That needs to change. This is lawsuit number 1, lawsuit number 2, lawsuit number 3. And I wonder, if you wrote a book, it probably wouldn't have to be more than 12 chapters. It's probably mostly little illustrations about what it is that's out there, just even focused on nutraceuticals. Is that what you're saying you're going for? Stuff like that? Because the nutraceuticals business has just like exploded, right? The internet is created. It's almost like porn. Like it's bigger than, like someone said, the internet at this point is 25% porn. 25%, that sounds like a lot.
That's a lot.
Right? But they said it's actually gone down. Like at the very beginning, it was closer to like 45%. At the very start. Yeah, it's gone down because of all the other content. All the other content is like nutraceuticals and all the other marketing stuff that you see.
One supports the other.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, conceptually, so people are saying, like, I don't even understand this area. What the hell is a genome? It's very abstract. It's very symbolic logic. It's not something you can put your finger on. It's not something you can taste or touch or smell. It's very much like almost a series of mathematical equations, right? It's very abstract. I mean, for you, it's probably very specific and very obvious. And you're like, oh yeah, we visualize this stuff all day long. But for most Americans and probably most everyone around the world, it's extremely like, I don't know what the genome is. I don't know. I remember something from the OJ case where they talked about different things and a bloody glove and this, like that. That's what they'll say to you. Like they'll say to you, if you did these interviews, they'd be like, I don't know, there was something where they had some lawyers that really knew this stuff and talked about how the DNA was all screwed up and the police screwed up and da-da-da. And, most jurors don't have the foggiest idea of how biology works. They have zero understanding. So you take that 12-chapter book and that becomes your business card. That book, which doesn't have to be more than 100 pages, becomes, hey, look, I'm going to send you my book. Every VC, we're going to send you the book because this is, and then you have a chapter about the future. and maybe the business gets a little bit of promotion, but it's like a primer 101, like how
Yeah.
this stuff works. Because I do think the problem is most VCs don't really have the depth of understanding to even understand like what it is you do and how big the
Yeah.
addressable market could really be. And then, of
Yeah.
course, they're always like, well, do you need a big sales force to make this happen? Or people just come to you? Do you have such brand recognition that people just come
Yeah.
to you? And maybe the book actually helps that. And it doesn't have to be PhD level, and it doesn't have to have footnotes, it doesn't have to have a lot of science. In fact, I'd almost make it like a children's book. I'd almost make it like this is explain like I'm 5 years old how this stuff works. Because I look at your slides and I have to tell you, I have a lot of VC friends, and I have a much deeper attention span than most VCs most of the time. And I thought, man, this is some really sophisticated stuff. And there's a lot of information on those slides. I mean, a lot. And I talk to my friends all the time and I say, how long do you spend with any slide deck? And they're like 90 seconds. And I say, well, 90 seconds, the slide deck probably took like, 90 hours to put together. You can't just put 90 seconds into it. And they say, I want to see, if it's early stage, I want to see the team up front and what the team is really comprised of and whether it has what might be called like the two essential elements, sometimes three. Like one, there's a visionary, sometimes there's multiple visionaries, but a visionary and then a doer. And if you
Yeah.
have two doers, that's even better. So like theoretically, like
Yeah, we did it.
that's good. Well, you know what? You want the slide to really say that because that's a book you all have to read. I'll send you the link called Traction. That's very much about how if you don't have those two and ideally three legs to the stool, you can't really get traction because if it's all visionaries, then you might as well just be back in academia. You're going to just spin out white papers and do some really interesting stuff scientifically, but it's never going to get productized because there's got to be someone that actually gets the business model and then make sure the trains are running on time. And if a sales force is needed, they find a way to outsource it or they find a way to get the work done. That's a hard part, right? Because a lot of people never get above the noise. And then they say that only takes 30 seconds. Like they're explaining to me why it's 90 seconds. 30 seconds, you look at the team, does it have the three legs or the two legs or at least something that's approaching traction? The second thing is there really a market? Like, is this just like, gravy? Like a little bit of gravy on the mashed potatoes, but basically it's not really a big market. It's not here yet. It may be in the future. It's not needed. People don't, whatever. Like it's got to be something that just sounds massive and growing and not nichey, right? So they say that's like 30 seconds. So they're like, I can tell right away. And sometimes they can't tell. And then I'll tell you what the third thing is. They say, did these people, knowing and having this big TAM, this big total addressable market with people that can actually kind of make it happen, do they look like they can get in front of a customer and get the 10 big reference customers by the time the runway runs out? And they don't want the runway to be like $100 million. They want the runway to be like maybe $10 million, even better, $5 million. And get the first 10 customers that really are going to say the Series B can be 5X. So let's say right now, I don't know what your valuation is. I mean, I have a side fund called Florence Ventures. We do stuff that's totally in the garage, very early, under $1 million. We write often the first $50,000 check to help people kind of get out of the garage. You're far beyond that. But conceptually, the VCs are like, if I can get into that at a valuation where it's going to jump to like $100 million. So if I can get in at like 20 million and I can put the first 4 or 5 million in because they want a big enough stake to put a board member on, then I can imagine I'm going to help them get to the B level with 5X. And then we're going to get to the C level with another 5X. And then we're going to figure out whether we're merging into getting acquired by, or maybe even doing a SPAC or an IPO or something that gets to something much bigger. And they're like, that's 30 seconds. They're like, I can figure that out in 30 seconds. I'm like, you can't do that stuff in 90 seconds. And they're like, trust me, I do it all day long. And then I say, okay, when you call them in to have the meeting, and now it's on Zoom because people don't want to travel anywhere. How long does it take you to figure it out after you figured out, well, they've made it to the meeting because the 90 seconds turned into it was worth doing? They're like, I give them like twice as much time. I give them 180 seconds. So that I said, they travel, sometimes they come in from somewhere. They said, yeah, I typically know within 3 minutes if this is going to go somewhere. So you have to be so laser focused on why it is that this is just going to be the best thing they ever invested in. And it's a hard thing to do because I do think you can do it, in a way that you believe works. And often it doesn't because it takes too long or because you didn't ring the right bells. I mean, look at some people like the woman that did the blood company, Elizabeth Holmes. She had an unbelievable presence and she really made herself look like she was the next Steve Jobs. And sadly, she didn't have any of the science. She didn't have the PhDs you guys have. They had nothing. But she had this persuasive ability to convince people that she was going to do the impossible. And we laugh because, now there's this certain prejudice against people that are trying to do really big things because it becomes like, this could just be another Theranos. Like, or the other one is the guy who's also in jail, SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX, changed the world of cryptocurrency, right? Big cryptocurrency exchange. I think it was totally real. I think it was just kind of pushing the envelope a little too hard. But I have to tell you, he had something very real. She didn't have something real at all, but she made it look like she had it. You guys have something very real. The real question is, can you get those first 10? Now, maybe you already have the first 10 customers, right? Which is even better, right?
Yep.
Yep.
We have the first 10 customers and we are in discussions with really large groups that just are large enough that they take a little bit more time. But we've been really, I think the best example is functional mushroom products are the fastest growing, and there's not really any testing available for species identification except for us. And we have that in hand because we're able to offer something that no one else can, and we can do it all in one sample prep, which is
And
something.
is this the mushrooms as in like microdosing mushrooms, or is this like
No.
mushrooms as in like turkey and mushroom gravy?
It's in like functional mushrooms. So reishi, chaga, cordyceps.
Okay. Where you're eating them. Like
You're eating them.
You're eating them.
But they're not making you see fair.
They're dietary supplements.
Oh, dietary supplements.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but there is food stuff like truffles. I guess there's different flavors of truffles, right? That are pretty expensive. And I assume people want certain certification that it's a certain type of truffle. I think seafood is, I worked through undergraduate and graduate school as a class 1 tractor trailer driver in the Fulton fish market. I was the youngest tractor trailer driver in New York City ever. Like I think that's even better than.
Does that mean that you used your horn the most?
Yeah, I mean, no, it means I knew how to do like a 13-speed, transmission, which is without even using the clutch, which is like an art. Like there's ways to shift a manual transmission without even pressing a clutch. People don't realize all the little tricks that truck drivers do. But the reason I raised that is the fish market was pretty pure back then. Like, it seemed to me that the fish, no one questioned plastics in fish or any of the stuff that people question now, that maybe we're changing the epigenetics of the fish that get caught, and maybe the fish that we're eating in turn is causing some change for us in what we actually ingest and digest. And, people back then, of course, this was like the 1970s, they were like, fish was a regular thing on Fridays for the Catholics in New York City. It was a big deal. And there were things called fish stores that literally only sold fish.
Fishmongers, yeah.
Fishmongers. And it was like, it seemed very pure as a business. Obviously, there was a lot of other stuff that happened in that business. It had all sorts of mafia connections. There's all sorts of other nutty stuff. But conceptually, I think today people look at fish like it could be dangerous. And I
Mm.
wonder to some degree if there's some aspect of the way the world is headed that suggests you really do need some certification that something has a certain level of purity or a certain level of it doesn't have a bunch of plastic in it. It's actually, it's actually the real thing. Like I think to some degree, maybe the Japanese are ahead of us on that. Like maybe the Japanese are more pure in what they do with their foodstuffs. I just wonder, like to some degree, if even this concept of a blue zone where people live to like 110,
Yeah.
maybe there's more purity in the food that they eat, or I don't know. You tell me, because it seems like there's a connection between what you do and perhaps the notion of better health in some sort of logical way.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely connections. I think one thing is as we become more global with our supply chain, you get more fraud. Like every time those botanicals leave the field and are changed, they change every time they change hands, it's another opportunity to basically cut it with something cheaper. And that's one of the issues is that one of the ways that we really look at these plants currently are using techniques that assay them via chemistry. And chemistry is quite easy to fool because you can put other things in the product that are completely invisible to the chemistry. And so you're cutting it with an invisible adulterant. And a lot of times these adulterants aren't bad for you, but
Hmm.
you're not getting the good thing you're buying, right? And so if you're buying this for sleep or you're buying this because you've got bad indigestion problems or, whatever your particular reason you're buying this to improve your health, you want to make sure you're actually getting the thing that you're purchasing to improve your health. And I think that's one thing that's really challenging is we have this notion that many people have a notion that herbal products just don't, like herbs don't work. And I think it's twofold. One, there's plenty of data that suggests herbs really do work. You have to take them at certain doses and you have to take them consistently and you have to be taking the herb. And so I think that's one of the issues is
The genuine goods,
yeah, and you go in
right?
and you buy, there's 10 different brands on the shelf, and there's one bottle that's $100 and there's another bottle that's $10. I guarantee you the thing you think is in that jar at $10 is not there.
Right, but it's not just a price thing, right? I would
No,
imagine sooner or
it's
later
not
someone
just the
will
price.
brand something, right? That will put a brand or put some sort of certification on it at some level, right?
Absolutely. It's not just a price thing, but there is something to be said about the consistency and quality of a brand. Are they doing their testing? And many brands have amazing products. And then a lot of brands have rice powder in those packs,
Right.
And so I think that's the problem is that it's such a, especially with, sectors that are growing really quickly, like the functional mushrooms. If there's only 100 million pounds of a mushroom and 200 million pounds of product are being sold, well, there's
They're
an
they're
issue there.
spike they're spiking it. They're spiking it with other items,
Things,
right? Other
and
things.
in the best case, it's innocuous things that, aren't harmful to you, but you're not getting the benefit, right? So I think that's the most important aspect is are you getting what you pay for? And that's not only as a customer going into a store, it's also a business buying from a vendor where you're dissociated from that supply chain. You're not in the field, you're not even getting a whole plant. You're getting a powder or tea cut, right? So you have many, many hands in between production and product.
So are you guys actively pitching the VCs now? Or are you getting ready to do it? Or are you mostly, because I could tell you, you would do well on a stage like, for example, these family offices that now are voiding VCs altogether. Like their family office segment of early stage investments is like 10 times larger than most VCs. Like it's massive. The family offices have accumulated trillions and trillions of dollars. It's a relatively small group of families. So let's pretend it's like 1,000 families. It might be a little more than that. The VCs actually compete against them. And the family offices actually give you better valuation and typically have a longer horizon and less pressure. So
And
some
I think
people
that's important for us because we are at a growth inflection point where we have, like Karen was saying, we have customers and we have quite a few larger customers, but because they're large organizations, the lead time to actuating a deal or a plan is long. Everyone kind of makes fun of me, but I use this boat analogy all the time. Like we're a really small little warship, right? Like we can turn really quickly and pivot and get where we're going. But the organizations we're working, they're like huge aircraft carriers. They're one direction. Then for them to pivot, it takes a long time to move that ship. But once they do, they're there. And that's what we're doing right now. So we're moving those ships to get on our path. And they're interested in getting on our path, but that process is not short. And so
right.
we need runway to get those organizations on board such that we can really prove our traction, right? We have customers, so we have traction, but really move the needle with those customers where visionaries can see, oh, I see the longer leap. And these organizations are leading the way because we also are a transformative technology, right? We're replacing the way people are doing their testing now with technology that is more accurate, more efficient, and can do more things at once. So it's much more scalable, both in the lab and within the testing framework of an organization itself. And so there's some paradigm shifting that has to happen. And part of that is working with these larger organizations because once they join, it's kind of like investing, right? Like as a little tiny investor, I might not have the resources to do the due diligence on a particular investment. But if a larger organization's done that due diligence and I trust them, then all of a sudden I don't have to go through that process. And that's really what these organizations are going to be for us. They are the larger ships that are going to do that due diligence that will then allow other individuals who may be interested but worried about their capacity to vet our technology.
Okay, so now let's give Kerin a chance to just say one thing because I raised this question with Nick, and I think he had an answer. I said, no, don't give the answer. Let's hear the answer from your other founders. What is the one market that if you did get the money, whatever the number is, I forget, 5 million, 10 million, but some big number that gives you the runway. Kerin, what's the one market you would absolutely pursue as a result of having that money? What do you think that is?
So there's two sides of this, and I'll just start with the baseline. The baseline is dietary supplements. And the reason I say that is because the FDA requires that product manufacturers test their final form. But the people are not doing that right now because current methods can't do it. So they do the next best thing and they test their raw ingredient input, but that's not what the FDA wants. But they're required to do final form. But you can't ask someone to do something when there's no test to do it. Well, now we can do it. So now you have this entire dietary supplement market in the United States required to do something, could never do it, now have one option. That's us. So that's where I would focus because you have external pressure in addition to, of course, label transparency movements, but really the FDA behind you saying, oh, wait, no, this is now a possible. You need to do this now. The other answer is that, of course, food is huge, but food doesn't have as many testing requirements. They do their testing for foodborne illness. They do it for allergens because they don't want to be sued, right? They want their food to be safe. And the sheer size of the market is why food is another vertical that's important to penetrate. But in terms of immediate need, it's going to be dietary supplements. And natural OTC drugs play into that because they're dealing with pharma. They have similar responsibilities, but we're already in that market. We're already cultivating clients. We're already talking to those large groups. That market movement is already happening. And so we want to show that to be successful, to show that we have that focus and can deliver so that when we expand out into all these other verticals, which can include fish, as we were talking about, we have the backing and the chops and the proof to show that we can do it. So I think that would be.
So you are potentially more like BioWorks than LeafWorks. I mean, I hear you're focusing initially, but I think you're actually a bigger platform and a bigger data play, and probably ultimately, like Google, you probably have to assemble as many great PhDs or the equivalent into one network. Like it's almost like anyone that wants to be in this field would want you guys to be the thought leaders teaching the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, and you amass this unbelievable amount of talent that becomes this driving force on the much bigger mission to bring this super transparency.
So, we're starting in an area. So forensics is the gold standard. DNA will put someone behind bars for life. But when it comes to just starting with plants, with botanical science, botanical forensics hasn't existed because it's been too difficult to do. And we're the only group that has done it. And so just the foundation there, it's not just products, it's also agriculture, right? We can, Eleanor has, I think I know exactly what she's going to say, where when we test your material, we can tell you what's in it, was what other species of ingredients were in it, was the plant that you were using sick. We can tell you attributes about that plant. We can help you breed for a better plant, all with that one test, right? That's just where we are now.
What do you call it? What are you calling that test? So you got a brand on that test? What do you call it? Do you have a name?
They're just different questions. They're just different analytical questions.
But think now that you're dealing with a 5-year-old and you say to the 5-year-old, no, seriously, we call that portfolio A, or we call that, group test B or whatever. Like I'm telling you, people want to think, okay, like, I'm telling you where I think this is going to go, and you're going to tell me I'm crazy. I think you're going to personify an AI person for a group of tests. So that's the Barbie test, to use Barbie and Ken. I don't think you should use Barbie and Ken, but just you're with me, right? Like,
I'm with you.
Also, Kerin, Eleanor, and Nick.
No, it becomes very much like this persona will attack this problem and become a super expert on this problem. Of course, he's backed by all the science and all the scientists and all the research and all the data, but you've personified a robot, the equivalent of a robot, who actually now is like, your workforce is actually you plus 10 other people plus 100 of these personas that can do fish, and then you get the right fish name, and you can, people are going back to like the Greeks and using some of the Greek names because they think it's like so powerful to talk about Greek gods. But I'm telling you, if you can create that story and build it in a way that says, we're punching out these unbelievably successful mad scientists, but they're all under our control and they all extend our agenic network. Because they're really kind of an AI agenic scientific group, and build that into the book. That's where I would go. I would make the book and then have a few chapters about how the future of a startup in this space is very much realizing that you've got this mega workforce now that Claude Code or any of the other tools now gives you. And you start to become like, these people know how to take $1 and stretch it into $100 of value, or $1,000 of value, or $10,000 worth of value. And that, I think, is a magical transformation when your mindset starts thinking that way, because all of a sudden you say, okay, we're going to build this, and the customer's probably going to pay for it. In truth, like if the customer puts you on a set of nutraceuticals, you're going to build that persona, and it's going to be like code within the organization. And there's going to be people that are like supporting that team, and maybe have 10 teams and 1,000 of these agents, with each team having 100. But I'm just throwing it out as an idea because ultimately that's the way most of the pitches I see of AI-based companies are coming in the specific domains they're dealing with, and talking about the future workforce is a lot smaller group of humans who are expensive and they have health benefits and all the other stuff that's called overhead. But these agents work 7/24. Yep. And they never gripe. They don't unionize. They don't call in sick. No, trust me. Let me tell you something. If you can be small is beautiful forever, I would say do it, Like, just don't even say we're going to use it to add like 1,000 more bodies. Say, we're going to do it to create 1,000 more assistants or 1,000 more agents or whatever exact wording you decide upon. Because I can tell you the overhead costs grow exponentially as you add people, and the knowledge transfer, the tacit knowledge transfer cost grows with it. So every time you add another person, even if they're really smart and they get it and they have all the credentials. So that I would just counsel you. And I like the idea, frankly, of the book, because I do think this is a very challenging area and the slides are difficult. I think the slides are good, but you have to spend a lot of time, and you're dealing with people who unfortunately don't really spend the time. But I will say this in ending. I think you guys are off to a great start. Obviously, Nick loves working with you. And he said, hey, you got to meet them. They're really great. They're really fun. And you've been at it for 10 years. So congratulations. And you don't look older for it. So congratulations on that. Seriously, it can age you. It can age you rapidly. Yeah. And I wish you the best of luck. And I will try to make some connections for you. So stay positive.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah. Talk to you later. Take care.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Tune in next time on the Valley Current.